Good morning, you guys. Good morning on a foggy, kind of cool fall morning. It's crazy. Right now we've got about a half a mile visibility in fog. Just down the road here, it's like we have Clearbrook interchange just by the freeway, which is where you go out the east route. It's pretty much clear, so it's not not too far away. The fog is very isolated and low, but right here in this area, if you guys look up, you can actually see some blue sky up there, and I'm starting to see a poke through of sun just off in the horizon there, which is a good thing because that means it's going to start burning off. What actually has to happen is the sun needs to penetrate through to the ground. A lot of people, it's a misconception, they think that the sun actually burns the fog off. Well, the sun actually doesn't technically burn the fog off. What it does is it heats the ground up, and then that heat radiates up, and that's what actually dissipates the fog. So we've got a fun day today because we've got a packed schedule, and we've got fog that we have to wait for. So I just want to talk to you guys for a couple minutes about things like this. So scheduling with helicopters, waiting for weather, and what kind of weather minimums you have in this kind of situation. So when you have scheduling, sometimes what happens is the day just gets pushed. If everybody's flexible, the day can get pushed and everybody just starts flying a little bit later. Sometimes what happens, unfortunately, if the day can't get pushed, if it's going to get dark and we can't fit everything in, then whoever's slot is first thing in the morning, unfortunately they end up missing their slot, and then they'll make it up hopefully the next day or something. Sometimes we're able to just shorten up everybody's flights and still fit everything in, or fly over lunch break or something like that. So that can work as well. But let's just talk a little bit about weather minimums for you guys that are interested in this. These are for Canada, but from my understanding, they apply to the US as well. Should be the same there. So we're in a control zone. This is in Canada a Class Charlie control zone, which anytime you're in controlled airspace, the weather minimums that we have, the acronym that we remember is 351. So what that means is we have to have 3 miles of visibility. So I need to be able to see 3 miles, which right now I can see, about a half a mile. Those trees over there, you guys see those trees? Maybe not. Those are about a half a mile away, so I can just barely kind of see those. So I need to be able to see 3 miles. I need to have 500 feet vertical clearance from clouds. So I need to be able to be 500 feet below clouds, and technically be able to be 500 feet above the ground at the same time. But I need to be able to have that 500 foot clearance below the clouds. And then I need to be able to have 1 mile horizontally away from clouds. So beside me, I can't have clouds any closer than 1 mile. So 351 for inside a control zone. Now, there's an exception for that. You can have what's called special VFR. So a pilot needs to request special VFR, and that's something that allows you to actually fly down to as low as a half a mile visibility and clear of cloud. This is for helicopters, not for airplanes, okay? So don't get the two confused. So half mile visibility, clear of cloud, but there's a few caveats that go along with that. So when you want to do that, you have to fly, you're taking on the risks yourself, so you have to actually request it from the tower, and then they'll give it to you. They won't just automatically give it to you. You have to fly at reduced speeds, lower altitudes. You have to be able to be in direct contact of the ground to be able to visually see the ground at all times. They want you to fly slower just so that there's no way you're going to fly into another aircraft or terrain or something like that. So that's fun. Half mile visibility is not a lot. As I say, right now we can kind of see those trees there. We could maybe get over to the infield and do like some infield hover work and that sort of thing, but departing the zone right now, there's no chance. Like we definitely wouldn't be able to get out of here. So yeah, I guess we're just waiting. You know what? I'm just noticing now that sun that we had a minute ago is gone again. So things have thickened up. The fog's moving around a little bit, and things have definitely thickened up a little bit. That kind of sucks. Okay, so now talking about when we get outside of a control zone. So if we're in uncontrolled airspace, they actually split it up whether you're above 1,000 feet or below 1,000 feet, okay? So if you're above 1,000 feet, the acronym that we're gonna remember is 152. So again, this is now 1 mile visibility, so you have to have a mile visibility. The same thing applies. You need to be 500 feet below the clouds and then 2,000 feet horizontally away from the clouds. So beside you, you can't have clouds that are closer than 2,000 feet. Judging what 2,000 feet is, what is 2,000 feet around here? I would say 2,000 feet is kind of like those bushes right over there. So that's approximately 2,000 feet. No clouds closer than that to the side, but you need to be able to still have 1 mile visibility in front of you, okay? Now again, this is above 1,000 feet. If we're going to go below 1,000 feet, we can actually get 1 mile visibility and clear of cloud. So as long as we're clear of the cloud, we can be 50 feet below the cloud or something. As long as we're clear of it and we can see 1 mile in front of us, then we're okay to fly in uncontrolled airspace below 1,000 feet. Now, the reason that they actually differentiate this and make this different is because if you're below 1,000 feet, you have more visual contact to the ground, you have more reference, and so you're closer to the ground. Typically what they're expecting is pilots, again, this is helicopters, not airplanes, pilots are going to get closer to the terrain. They're going to have that visual reference of the trees or whatever it's going to be. And because of that, you can actually have lower weather minimums. Okay, so that's cool. There's one extra thing. So if you're a pilot that has more than 500 hours pilot and command time, and you've done what's called a PDM course, so a pilot decision making course, and your company ops manual is actually certified to be able to fly in low vis flying, and you personally have done your recurrency training, your annual recurrency training for low vis flying, if all of those conditions are met, you can actually fly in the same thing as special VFR, so half a mile and clear of cloud, which is pretty ridiculous because when you're out in the mountains and you're flying around, to fly in half a mile, which is basically this, is pretty nuts. However, as pilots, we get into this kind of stuff, and it's not enjoyable. None of us enjoy flying in that kind of stuff, but it definitely does happen. Try and avoid it at all costs because it's a pretty gnarly situation to be in. But ideally, if you do have to fly in something like that, it's only for a very short amount of time, and then you can get back out of it. Operations like heli skiing, unfortunately, this becomes a pretty common thing. Heli skiing pilots have to deal with, they're in the winter time, there's lots of fog, lots of cloud, and the customer still wants to get to the top of the mountain to do their skiing. So there's lots of industry pressures from that. And so that's something that, they deal with on a pretty regular basis, and they have to make that call, and they have to decide what a half mile is and whether it's actually safe to go out. Now, interesting enough, so right now, this is about a half mile viz, but we've got lots of greenery, so lots of definition, lots of terrain and stuff like that to look at. And so flying around in this actually isn't incredibly unsafe if you're doing it properly, you have the right training, and you're operating at reduced speeds and so forth. Try that in the winter when everything's just white and snowy, maybe the odd little tree poking out or something like that. But you have this white uniform mountain, and then it goes into this gray cloud sort of sky. That's where it gets really, really scary. So that's something to consider as well. We had a situation a couple situations on our world tour when we were in northern Canada and in Greenland. We had a couple situations where, actually not so much Greenland, northern Canada, where it was snowing on us, so kind of a gray day like this, and it was snowing, and then the ground was mostly uniform snow, and then there was these patches of rocks around, and the visibility was very reduced, and probably I would say about like this, probably about a half a mile, and having that lack of reference was really, really difficult. Having those patches of rocks were useful. It was really helpful to have that. But definitely it was difficult because of that lack of terrain. The moment we got terrain and everything was kind of black rock again and stuff, then all of a sudden it became much easier. We would drop down out of the mountains a little bit, get down into more of a valley, everything blackened up a bit, and there was some vegetation and stuff, and all of a sudden, wow, it became so much easier to fly in that. So that's interesting. Also, when we were flying across Saudi Arabia in the desert, we had a situation where we had to be up at 8,500 feet. They would not clear us below 8,500 feet, just part of the regulations there. And we were over the desert, and there was kind of, I'm not going to say it was like this, but if you can kind of picture, it was like a bit of a milky sort of moisture in the air. So I think it was a mix between just a little bit of sand kicked up and then just a little bit of moisture in the air. And so it created this kind of this film haze type thing across the entire desert. We flew for like 9 hours that day to get across the Saudi Arabia desert. And most of the desert floor actually had a lot of terrain. There was mountains and lots of definition. Even the big sand dunes, when you had the big sand dunes and stuff, there was lots of definition there. And that actually wasn't too bad. But then we got to one patch for probably about 45 minutes or so where the desert floor just totally flattened out and it just became completely brown. And so we were up at 8,500 feet. We kept requesting lower, and they denied. And we were like, man, this is not good. And so the desert floor was all uniform brown, and it kind of melded up into the sky into this kind of browny haze layer. And it was actually getting really scary because we were completely starting to lose our reference. And interestingly enough, they had these little nomadic tribes. I don't know what they do out there, but basically it was this little trailer and a water truck beside it. They were all exactly the same, a little trailer and a water truck beside it, and then a tent and this herd of like maybe 10 to 15 camels or something. And they would have these little tribes all over the desert, and it was crazy because they were kind of semi-equally spaced apart, and what we found is your eye doesn't take much to actually gain reference. It only a tiny little bit of something that you can kind of cling on to, and your eye can actually take that and it can interpret speed and altitude and definition and all this kind of stuff. And so we would actually find that we could find one of these tribes, and we'd be able to say, okay, now I can definitively tell how high I am, how fast we're moving, where the terrain is and stuff. And we'd start seeing that thing disappearing, and we were like, oh man, and then we'd look up and there was another one. And we actually hopped from one of these tribes to the next, all the way through that really flat part of the desert. And that was literally our only true, real good reference to tell exactly what the terrain under us was doing. Otherwise, everything just kind of looked pretty brown. It was a very, very scary situation. And so we eventually got through that. The terrain came back and it was all good. Okay. So we theoretically had, I would say, 10 to 15 miles of visibility, like true visibility. So if there was definition and terrain and stuff like that, we could actually see quite a ways. So it was really good. Maybe we can even see 20 miles, you know. And so that was fine. But as soon as that terrain became very uniform, it made it way, way, way more difficult. So wherever you're flying, if you're flying in the desert, if you're flying over water, if you're flying in the mountains, in the snow, whatever, just be aware of those things. Be aware of the weather conditions and how the terrain can actually affect that. And the terrain can change very quickly, so be aware of that. You can be flying in nice terrain, all of a sudden you turn the corner and there's just a big white glacier in front of you. That can very dramatically change how much visibility you have on these types of great days. So I hope you guys like this short little video. I kind of got off on a couple little tangents there, but I think it was interesting. It's interesting for me to kind of reflect on those moments, especially on a day like this. I'm starting to see maybe a little more clearing up again. Maybe that's just the hopeful wishing that it's going to get better. I don't know, but we're just going to wait it out. It's the best thing you can do with weather. Be prepared, plan to have a backup plan, so if you have gear and stuff like that you can just land somewhere, wait, shut down. That's the best thing you can do. Don't try and push it and try and make it through weather that you shouldn't be flying through. So we're just going to hang out. Everybody's going to pre-flight the helicopters in the hangar and stuff, keep them nice and warm, and then once it breaks and we can get a bit more visibility, we're going to get ourselves out of here. When I came from home this morning, I was just slightly up on the hill and it was just blue sky and gorgeous, and I could see all the fog layer down in the bottom of the valley. So we know it's coming. We know the sun's going to burn this stuff off, technically heat up the ground, which is going to radiate the hot air and burn off this fog. But anyways, looking forward to an awesome day of flying. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we're going to talk to you on the next one. See ya.